What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to a Friday edition of the Stokastic NHL Strategy Show, sponsored by BetMGM. I am your host, Josh Harris. Joining me, as always, is on my right, your left, our left, your right. I don't know. It's Friday.
I think it's your left too. Looking at it, I mean, on my screen.
Yeah. We're off to a rip roaring start.
Yeah, we're on the ball today, bud.
How you doing today?
Not too bad, man. Still pretty nice outside, so I'll never complain about having some nice weather. Yeah, pretty good slate we have here tonight. I talked about it briefly in my picks article. Free to read up at Stokastic.com. Just head on over to the NHL section. Only 4 games tonight, but there is a lot of firepower on this slate, right? You have Sidney Crosby, you have Evgeny Malkin, you have Matthews and Tavares and Stamkos and Kucherov and Alex Ovechkin, and you got Dallas at home, the Dallas top line, arguably the best line in the league so far this season. And then you have the Minnesota Wild going into Seattle, which should be a pretty fun game to watch and break down. So only 4 games, but definitely lots of good spots, or at least good players here tonight. Maybe not necessarily good spots, but yeah, pretty interesting.
Yeah, lots of big boys on this slate. If you're a single entry player like I am, there's going to be a lot of tough fades. There's some interesting, obviously, when we get into it, there's some pretty high owned spots. There's some fairly surprisingly low owned spots here that we will definitely discuss. But yeah, I actually really like this 4-game slate, which means, generally when I like things a lot, it goes terribly wrong. Last night also kind of went wrong. I mean, I had a lot of right. I just bubbled. How'd you do last night?
Yeah, didn't cash. I was cashing pretty well until that second period of the Avs game, and then the chalk just absolutely went nuts. Had a pretty decent lineup. I had the Carolina power play guys, so Svechnikov, Necas, and Aho. Svech, obviously, with the hat trick, which was nice. Pieces of the Rangers' third line. They weren't great, but they put up, 24-plus points for, 6,700 or whatever the combined cost was, so pretty good. What really blew it for me was my one-off. I had Johnny Gaudreau in there, and he had a 3-point night about, an hour before lock or something like that. I switched it to Jesper Bratt because Bratt was my hat trick pick on the show yesterday. So I would say a little bit of life advice. Don't panic swap or late swap if you don't really feel like you need to. Just as you always say, pretty eloquently, go with what your first reaction or instinct was with your lineup. Don't keep tinkering. That cost me last night. So I'm not mad about it. It is kind of frustrating when your two stacks, their teams combined for 15 goals because the Rangers won 8-2. Carolina won 7-2 last night, and you still don't cash. That feels kind of bad, but I'm not going to complain. I feel like it was a pretty good process. Just didn't get there, and that's what happens when you play one lineup.
Yeah, I made a bad swap as well. I had a full Colorado power play stack, like all 5 of them. Mikko Rantanen outscored Svechnikov, despite Svechnikov having a hat trick because Mikko Rantanen hit the shots bonus, the points bonus, arbitrary bonuses, I guess. But
yeah,
I was deciding because if you have full power play stack, you have to go 5-2-1 or 5-1-1-1. I was deciding between the Rangers' third line or parts of the Kings. Instead of going Hedel Lafreniere, I ended up going Victor Arvidsson and Arthur Kaliev, which seemed like a good idea at the time, but it ended up being a bad swap. But I saw we got tagged on Twitter. He's in the chat actually under Kyle B23. He won a 100-person contest last night. Excellent lineup. Congrats to you. That was nice to see. I always like waking up to other people winning if it's not me myself. Selfishly, I want it to be me myself, or but if it's not, if you guys win, makes me happy. Gives me some hopium for the rest of the day so I don't have to start chugging banks. And congrats to you.
Yeah, I mean, a tough break. Anybody using players from that Chicago Kings game. Sometimes Peter Mrazek and Jonathan Quick just combine for a .955 save percentage.
Back-to-back clunkers from the King. Oh, not like clunker. They were good hockey games. It was just like very low-scoring games.
Yeah, 1-0 and 2-1, I think, in their last 2 games. So I guess we're back to the 2013 LA Kings now.
Yeah, Hey, you. Yeah, you. I'm talking to you. Hit us with a like and subscribe to make sure to keep up with all of our DFS shows, offers, giveaways, all that fancy jazz. Once you hit subscribe, hit that notification buttons to get alerts when our shows go live. We have a lot of them every day. Don't forget, almost all of our content is available in podcast form, except for Live for Locks, on the platform of your choice. Help us out by leaving a 5-star review about my big head. That's how I know it'll be you. It is really big, and it's the one thing. If you want to make fun of me for it, don't make fun of my smile. Make fun of my giant melon.
I mean,
4-game slate, lots of firepower. Let's get into it. First game of the night, we have the Pittsburgh Penguins with a 3.0 total heading into Toronto. The Leafs have a 3.5 total, going to be Casey DeSmith against Eric Kallgren. Bit surprising they're going back to Casey Smith. Maybe not. Like Tristan Jarry struggled a little bit at the start of the season. Very heavy ownership on Toronto 1 here. And I will say they are very good offensively, even with Kerfoot there. But defensively, they're not elite like they were with, Bunting or Nylander up there. Kerfoot tends to drag them down defensively. They're not like bad by any stretch, giving up 2.75 expected goals against, something like that. It's a smaller sample, but that does bring Pittsburgh 1 into play for me a little bit here. They're coming in right at around double digits. I like both top lines in this game. Which one do you prefer?
Yeah. You're right about Alex Kerfoot. He's somebody that anybody that watched the shows last year knows we just railed against him pretty much every time the Leafs were on the slate because of how the Toronto second line would perform with them there. And you just have to go and look at the numbers, whether you're talking expected goals or actual goals. Especially the expected goals, he just drags down the bottom 6. There are a lack of options there. I will say that about the Toronto forwards. It's if you take Kerfoot out, I mean, I would leave Michael Bunting there, but it was a rough start to the season for him and for that line. So, I get why they changed it up. But, if you're not using Kerfoot or, if you're not using Bunting, other than Kerfoot, who do you put there? Calle Yarncroc, David Kampf, Pierre Engvall. They're just I think Engvall might actually be the best option, but there's no way they can do that. They need him in the bottom 6 to have any semblance of depth. So it is what it is. We kind of have to live with Kerfoot on the top line. You're right. He doesn't really help them in any manner. Like, because I mean, it's true. And the reason, like, I'm not just saying that. The reason for that is when you're playing with two super elite players, offensive players like Matthews and Marner, you have to be able to play with them at both ends of the ice. Like, you have to be the one that gets them the puck in the defensive zone, and you have to be able to kind of read their play, know where they're going to go after they pass a puck, know where they're going to be if you have the puck, and so on and so forth. Foot is just not that player. Like I said a minute ago, it was a problem with the second line last year. I don't see why it wouldn't be a problem with the top line this year. And it has been in a small sample. We're talking only about 55 minutes, but 3 expected goals per 60 minutes for that Toronto top line. Like, for 90% of the lines in that league, that would be pretty good. For that Toronto top line, that's pretty bad. Again, it's just a small sample. It's 55 minutes, but it's repeating what we saw with the Leafs in the second line with Kerfoot there last year. So, like, I don't have a problem in and of itself using the Toronto top line, right? Like, what I mentioned in the power play article, and we'll talk about the second line in a second, is the Pittsburgh penalty kill. The Pittsburgh penalty kill just has not been very good this year. 27th by shots allowed per 60 minutes when they're down a man, and 23rd by goals against. They've given up 11 power play goals against in 13 games. Last year, they only gave up 33 the entire season. So they're going to be on pace to break that by like game 50. This penalty kill has seen, at least so far in the early portions of the season, has seen a significant decline from how good they were last year. So that's why I don't really mind the Toronto top line, even though, going up against Crosby isn't, a particularly appealing matchup. It's that this is a pretty good power play spot for the Leafs. So where Marner's price has just been nuked to oblivion.
There's a couple guys mispriced tonight.
He's 5,500 on DraftKings. But the thing is, like, yeah, okay, with the way he's performed, maybe he's worth a little bit more than that. But, DK points per game, he's been less valuable than William Nylander this year, right? So eventually, we're a full month into the season. Eventually, you got to start pricing the guys for what they've done this year, not just what they've done historically. So I kind of get Marner 5,500, especially where he's not shooting at all. Especially on the power play. He has 3 power play shot attempts in his last 5 games. He's just not shooting. And I don't know if Alex Kerfoot on the top line is going to help. But again, because it's such a good power play spot, I think you're perfectly fine to go with Toronto 1 here. And, they're not coming in with terribly good leverage. And the reason for that is because of the pricing. If Marner was 7,500 instead of 5,500, I think this line's about 15% instead of, nearly 30%, which is our DK projection right now. So, again, I don't have a problem with the Toronto top line. I would probably make it some sort of power play stack, like Matthews and Marner with Tavares, Marner and Tavares and Nylander, something like that. And, to the point about Austin Matthews, like, it feels like he hasn't broken out yet this season. But he has 4 goals and 7 points in his last 5 games. That's, for almost any player in the league, that would be excellent. We're still waiting for him to really put his foot on the throat of the opponents. But it seems like he's just right there. Like, they just need a little bit of luck to go their way. He's still only shooting 4.4% at 5-on-5. Like, that could triple by the end of the season. Or between here and the end of the season. So again, I do like a Toronto. I don't mind Toronto 1 here, but I'd probably tend to some sort of power play stack. I think you're right about Pittsburgh 1 here, though. Against old Crosby and Rust, our early ownership on DraftKings has them coming in at around 10%, a little bit higher on FanDuel, but not that much higher, about 12%. And I wrote up Rickard Rakell in the same picks article on Stokastic.com, and I'll get to that second line stack in a second. But the top line with Gensel and Rust there has been excellent so far this year. 65 minutes together, 4 expected goals per 60 minutes, 5.4 actual goals per 60 minutes. Jake Gensel still shooting quite a bit. He is a boost to their power play as well. He had missed some time. That power play just scores more when he's on the ice than when they don't. You can go back years with that data. So it does help that he's back in the lineup. So I will say, I'm perfectly fine going with that Pittsburgh top line. It's a Pittsburgh second line that's kind of interesting to me more than anything here. Their ownership's coming in just fine, 6 to 7%. And it's, like I mentioned, it's Rickard Rakell that I brought up in the picks article. And the reason for that is the Toronto second line with Nick Robertson, their defensive numbers have taken a dive. And it's not that Robertson's a bad player. It's just that he's an offensive player and he's a rookie. Still kind of just getting used to the NHL, but 45 minutes together, 4.0 expected goals against, 2.7 actual goals against. That's a pretty big problem for Toronto and that line. Like, they've had some defensive issues going back to last year, like we talked about at the top of the show. So I kind of like that Pittsburgh second line, and I think you can do some sort of a Jill stack here, where you use two broken lines. So, Malkin, Rakell plus Crosby, Malkin, Rakell plus Gensel, something like that. Those top guys you and I were talking about it this morning in a DM about empty net goals. If you look at empty net goals over the last few years, near the top of the list, you see all the top Pittsburgh guys. It's Gensel, it's Rust, it's Crosby, it's those guys. So, they can, if they're up 4-2 at the end of the game, they can, definitely add to their total. Those are the guys that do it. So I do like Pittsburgh 2 here, like in a nutshell, considering their price, considering their matchup. By all means, go to Pittsburgh 1. They have looked excellent this year. I don't think it's really a brutal matchup going into Toronto 1 right now with Kerfoot there. But it's probably Pittsburgh 2 that I kind of like, just in a nutshell, considering price, considering ownership and all that. But again, I think Toronto power play would probably be the way to go if I were to stack anything on the Leafs side.
Yeah, I do like that Pittsburgh 2 call. I was actually looking at Toronto's 2 numbers with Robertson there. I'm glad you mentioned them because they're bad. Also, Eric Kallgren in net. Like, maybe he's fine, but maybe he's not. And, I think MME, you got to get both sides of this game. I do agree. Push comes to shove. You have to put one team in your lineup. It's going to be Toronto for me. That Pittsburgh penalty kill is what's really, really, really drawing me to the Leafs here. So either side, I think, is fine. I think Pitt 1's a nice contrarian option. There's another road contrarian option that we'll get to soon, but I think both sides of this game are in play, despite me always liking both sides of the game. On the blue lines, I mean, Morgan Riley's price has come under 5K. He just, he's priced maybe even too high for what he's been doing so far. He's kind of like, the Marner factor, like, he's priced appropriate as well. Like, if Marner starts shooting, that's the problem. That's the beef I had with him last year. He just wasn't shooting in the beginning of the season. Once he started shooting, he started scoring goals, et cetera, et cetera. Same Morgan Riley. He needs to start shooting on the power play. I think that'll come around. Timothy Liljegren, his line mate at 3,300 is fine. I guess Letang's fine.
Is he, though?
I don't know. Like, Letang and Riley are kind of like 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
Yeah.
I don't know. They're on the power play.
I know. Like, I did write up Morgan Riley in that picks article, and a lot of it's just driven by his price drop, right? Yeah. There were times last year you would see him in the mid 6s on DraftKings, and he's all the way down to 4,800 right now. I think he's cheaper than Jared Spurgeon, who's not on the Minnesota power play. Like, Morgan Riley's just not shooting. He's just not shooting the puck. I think he's at 1.6 shots per game so far this year, which is his lowest since his rookie season. It is something we mentioned on the show yesterday. Alex Pietrangelo scored, so he kind of made me look like an idiot. But Vegas's defensemen started shooting less this year than they have in recent seasons under their new coach, and that was something Toronto started a couple years ago with their defensemen shooting less. It's just really coming to a head with Morgan Riley now. Like, he's really no different to me than Quinn Hughes. And that's kind of a shame because he was like a pretty good, multi-category defenseman at one point. But, at 4,800, again, where we do like this power play spot for Toronto, I think Morgan Rielly does make a ton of sense. I don't mind Liljegren either. I'm mad I missed his big game in their last game out. He scored 2 goals against Vegas, which kind of sucks because I think I recommended him the game before that in Carolina, or was it Boston? But anyways, I missed his 2-goal game. Kind of sucks. He's not getting a ton of minutes just yet. Yeah, he's not getting a ton of minutes just yet, but he was up to 1840 in their last game. So maybe he's just going to play his way up to 21 minutes a game, which would be nice to see. I'm always a fan of Jeff Petrie as kind of like, avoiding the Chris Letang ownership. I think his price is just fine, but like I said, Rielly makes a ton of sense. I don't know if I would roster Letang. He's not shooting either. He's a little bit more expensive. So I agree. I think Timothy Liljegren probably makes the most sense. Jeff Petrie as well. Morgan Rielly for your Toronto PP stacks.
Yeah. Casey DeSmith, 6,900. He is tied for the cheapest goalie of the night with James Reimer. No min price goalies tonight, unfortunately, but any interest in these goalies?
I don't know. Taking one of those goalies on the road against Toronto, like if I were to be playing 20 lineups, I would probably have DeSmith in there somewhere, maybe in 1 or 2 lineups. In a single entry, I honestly think I'd rather just take the other side and just stack against him. I just don't think he's a very good goalie.
Yeah, I dropped a name into Discord today that is just forbidden for me, which we'll get to later. That's how highly I think of goalies tonight. But yeah, I'm not too. I think, like, honestly, because the Sharks have a good penalty kill, I'd rather take a stab on Reimer than DeSmith, but neither really exciting me. You can put in Kallgren for, with your Leaf stacks. I think it's fine.
Yeah, I don't think Kallgren's very good either. Like, he wasn't good. He doesn't have good AHL numbers, hasn't been good in a small sample in the NHL. Maybe it could be he's just not good. That's why he's their third stringer. But weird goalie stuff happens all the time. We saw that with Felix Sandstrom earlier this week.
Yeah. And 2 min price goalies winning last night, so there's that too. But do you want a $1,000 risk-free bet? Do you want 2 free months of Stokastic plus Platinum? Yeah, I'm talking to you. Then we got a deal for you. All you got to do is follow these steps, and you can get both. It's no strings attached. Literally no strings attached. There's no Geppetto above it, playing you like Pinocchio. All right. What I say is what's going to happen, and then you'll get everything. You create a free Stokastic membership using the form below. It's in the description. Or log in if you already have a Stokastic.com account. After you log in, you click the large BetMGM button that appears. Looks like the Lannister flag if you're a Game of Thrones fan. Then complete the necessary steps with BetMGM. Create a BetMGM sports account. It's like creating an account anywhere. It takes 2 minutes. It's easy. Deposit at least $10, depending on the risk-free bet you want to place. If you want $100, you bet the $100. If you lose, you get the $100 back in free bets. Make your first paid bet. That's pretty easy. If you're going to bet, it's usually paid. After your bet settles, you qualify for the Stokastic subscription. After all that happens, you'll get an email with instructions for redeeming your 2 free months of Stokastic plus Platinum. Literally, no strings attached. I will say the 2 free months is going to drop down to a month at some point, so there is no better time than now. Let's get into the next game of the night. We have the Tampa Bay Lightning with a 3.2 total heading into Washington. The Capitals have a 2.8. Probably Andrei Vasilevsky. Darcy Kemper is confirmed. News for the Caps, John Carlson is back. That's good news for them. That will push Eric Gustafsson down to the second power play unit. Not good for him, but that's all right. News on the Tampa side is now that top line is fully correlated on the top power play. So Vladislav Nemestikov and Victor Hedman off the top unit. Brandon Hagel, Mikhail Sergachev on. First thing I noticed in this game was Tampa's ownership. seems pretty low. Maybe it comes up in the next run, but it is less than Pittsburgh won here. They've been rolling. They got a Capitals team who have struggled on the penalty kill. Haven't been great defensively. Kemper struggled. I don't know. Tampa's in play for me. Never know what to do with the Caps. Luckily, on this short slate, where it's not a decision where, you got to play or fade Ovechkin. There's a lot of big boys on the slate. So what are you doing in this game?
Yeah, pretty interesting to have a full Tampa 1 on the power play coming in at 6% by our top stacks. I agree with you. I think that probably comes up a bit through the day. They aren't cheap. I mean, that we do have to be mindful of that. They are over 20K on DraftKings, the second most expensive line of the night, more expensive than Minnesota, Dallas, or Toronto. So, like, I kind of get why the ownership might not be that high when you have 3 pretty good top lines, all cheaper than them, 2 of them being at home. So, like, I don't think they come in at 6%, but if they come in at like 10%, I think that probably sounds about right to me. So it is interesting to get Hagel up there. I mean, Nemestikov wasn't doing anything. That was actually one of my notes in my prep notes was I think his shot attempts per 60 on the power play was like 6 and per 60 minutes. Like that'd be low for a defenseman at 5-on-5, let alone for a forward on the power play. Washington has been kind of changing the way that they send out their forward lines, which kind of changes the way I look at this game a little bit. Like they had been sending out the Kuznetsov Ovechkin line for a good chunk of the season against the opposing second line. They, according to our line matching buddy at line matching on Twitter, they've moved them down to third line matchups, which changes obviously who the Tampa first and second lines are going to face. So I was kind of hoping Steven Stamkos and Nick Paul would see a fair bit of that Kuznetsov line because Kuznetsov, Ovechkin, and Sheary, like they've been fine defensively, about 2.6 expected goals against per 60 minutes this year, in about 60 minutes together. But historically, Kuznetsov and Ovechkin not really that good defensively, and I was hoping to get Stamkos in that matchup, but it doesn't look like they're going to go in that direction. It looks like Washington's probably going to send out that Strome, Milano, Johansson line at least a little bit against that Tampa Bay second line. I still think that's a pretty good matchup. Like I know Strome and Johansson have been decent together in a pretty small sample this year. Like we're talking about 3 or 4 games worth of ice time. But Sonny Milano's not like he's a much better offensive player than he is a defensive one. I don't think Milano's a great defensive forward. Dylan Strome's never been a really good defensive forward. Marcus Johansson has been at times in his career, but he's starting to get up there in years, even though I think he's younger than me. So it feels weird to say that, but he's starting to get up there a little bit. So I don't think it's necessarily that tough of a matchup for that Tampa Bay second line. Tampa Bay second line's been really good this year. 2.8 expected goals for per 60, 1.6 against in 90 minutes together, scoring 3.4 actual goals per 60 minutes. So it's not that they're just generating, they're shooting as well. I wrote up Steven Stamkos in the Power Plays article, namely because of the power play matchup. As you mentioned, Washington's penalty kill, not very good. Depends what metrics you look at, but they're no better than average defensively. Some of their metrics, like expected goals, flirting with the bottom 10 in the league. So I think this is a decent power play matchup for Tampa Bay. And as you mentioned, they moved Mikhail Sergachev to the top power play because they had been struggling earlier in the season with Victor Hedman there. Like this is being done for a reason. So there isn't that much data to work with Sergachev on the top power play because Hedman, typically eats all the minutes when he's in, and Hedman doesn't really miss a ton of games. So how that actually works out, we'll have to see. I just think that you have to give Tampa a little bit of an advantage considering that Washington's penalty kill just has not looked good this year. So I wrote up Stamkos as a one-off for tournaments, but I think you can play him along with Nick Paul, even though Paul's not on the power play, obviously. Like Paul's been playing 18 or 19 minutes a lot lately. That's probably not a guy you want to leave off a stack unless you're just straight power play stacking Tampa Bay. So I do like Stamkos and Paul as like a little 2-man. The Tampa top line, I think obviously very much in play here for us. They've been excellent this year. As you mentioned, 3.2 expected goals for per 60 minutes, 4.0 actual goals for per 60 in 130 minutes together. So, we're getting up there in a pretty reasonable sample. I don't know if they're going to score 4 goals every 60 minutes, but I do think that they're going to continue generating quite a bit. They're going to see a fair bit of Lars Eller and Anthony Mantha. Now, it's kind of a bad matchup 5-on-5 because, like, playing against Lars Eller is just like kind of like playing in quicksand. Like, you just can't go anywhere. It's just a slow pace that he drags the game down to. But they are all on the power play. And as we mentioned, it is a pretty good power play matchup. So I think because it's just a 4-gamer, you can definitely full power play stack Tampa here. It is expensive, but there are cheap spots definitely elsewhere on the night, like the Dallas depth, the Seattle depth.
It is possible.
We'll get to those later. So don't mind Tampa power play stacking here. Like I said, I think you can, if you don't want a power play stack, I think Stamkos with Paul as a 2-man makes a lot of sense. Like, I think you can leave Alex Killorn off. Like, he's just not shooting this year. And that's kind of the one thing that had kept his fantasy value somewhat afloat over the last few seasons. So I don't mind that. On the Washington side, speaking of bad penalty kills, Tampa Bay's, man, they have not been very good on the penalty kill this year. A lot of their numbers, I was looking at a lot of their numbers are worse than Chicago's. So if you try to imagine, like, Tampa Bay isn't a 3-time Stanley Cup finalist, 2-time winner going into the season, if you can imagine that they're the Chicago Blackhawks on the penalty kill, that's how they've performed. So John Carlson coming back, I think, helps. But one thing I was looking at was Washington's power play without Backstrom or Oshie, because obviously Backstrom's out for a while. Oshie is still out, though he may return here in the next week or two. Over 110 minutes together, 6.1 expected goals for per 60, 7.1 actual goals for. Those aren't very good numbers. Those are Seattle Kraken numbers. We'll get to Seattle later, but not very good at all. And Marcus Johansson and Dylan Strome just aren't shooting on the power play at all. I think their combined shot rate is like half of Ovechkin's. So, are you going to power play stack Washington and hope that Strome and Johansson can rack up enough assists that they really smash their value? So I think with Washington here, I would, obviously Kuznetsov and Ovechkin are very much in play. They're coming in with a fair bit of ownership, but at relatively cheap prices is fine. And Kuznetsov is shooting more on the power play than he typically does. Like, saying Strome and Johansson don't shoot is true. A lot of those shots are obviously going to Ovechkin, but even there are some shots that are going to Kuznetsov as well. So on the Washington side, I mean, it seems too obvious, but the top line is what I like the best here. So I do like both of the top lines, but I think there's some merit to doing like a Stamkos Paul 2-man. If you want to get away from what could be some high ownership from Washington, what I think will be higher ownership on Tampa Bay than what we're showing right now.
Yeah, I always like the Capitals power play more if Nick Backstrom is there. Doesn't matter. As long as Ovechkin's there and Nick Backstrom's there, they'll find a way to score. Without him in the middle, Dylan Strome's trying to take that role, but you got to shoot the puck in that role. Otherwise, people actually cover Ovechkin, and that's the problem. So while, Tampa has a bad penalty kill, I think Kuznetsov, Ovechkin, Carlson would probably be where I'd go. I know Strome and Marcus Johansson are very cheap and help you save. If you want to include them, I guess that's fine, but there's other cheap options that I prefer. Tampa, yeah. I was messing around with power play stacks tonight because there is good power play stacks. You can full power play stack, right? It just gets you're going to have to use some cheap guys in there with them, but there are some that you like, that I like anyway. There's a mispriced defenseman under the floor that you can use that we'll get to later, but yeah, it's possible. Nikita Kucherov 9K is like, normally I'd be like, that's too expensive, but he's been playing lights out. I'm glad that DK is pricing these guys appropriately. I agree with you. Stamkos Paul does make a nice little 2-man there. Let's move to the blue line. Sergachev is $1,100 cheaper than Hedman on DraftKings. He is on that top power play. It's going to be Sergachev for me. Carlson is the power play guy. I'm good with that. I am kind of interested to see how the minutes get allocated now that Carlson's back. So I worry about Nick Jensen at 4,200 because his minutes could take a drastic drop here. So it's probably just going to be, Sergachev or Carlson, maybe some Chernak.
Yeah, there's just not a whole lot that I like for defensemen in this one. Obviously, Sergachev does make sense. Price is expensive. I think Hedman, obviously, you can kind of let him pass. I'm still on the Fairbury train, especially on FanDuel where he's only 3,700. I think he's perfectly acceptable. I really wish we'd know more about Nick Jensen's minutes. I'd hope that he'd still play 22 or 23 minutes, but I'm not sure. And obviously, his price has come up quite a bit, especially on FanDuel. So where there aren't really a ton of cheap defensemen, I think the only cheap guy I really like is Fairbury. But it's the PP guys are nothing really for me.
Yeah, and the Capitals coach is out tonight, I think. So who knows what they're going to do with those defenseman minutes. So, yeah. Don't forget you can find this show and all of our strategy shows for every sport. We have all the sports on the shows all the time. We're basically like a news channel on our Stokastic podcast channels. Main channel with all of our content, or each sport has an individual sports channel if you just like the one. Leave a 5-star review if you don't mind. Help us keep those shows free. If you love these shows, please go give us a review. Helps us out a lot. Helps us be here giving this information to you for free. Means a lot. So like, subscribe, 5-star review, whole 9 yards. Thank you. Let's move on to the next game of the night. We have
I just saw on Twitter they announced that there's going to be no World Cup of Hockey in 2024, which means we're going to go from 2016 till who knows when without a best-on-best tournament featuring NHL players. Because remember, they didn't go to the Olympics in 2018. They obviously didn't have the World Cup again in 2020 for pandemic reasons. And then they all backed out of the Olympics in 2022. So, I mean, they said they hope for one in February of 2025, but we honestly might go a decade without a best-on-best tournament featuring NHL players. This is unfathomable to me. As a Canadian, I'm pretty mad I'll never be able to see Crosby and McDavid on the same team playing internationally. That's pretty stupid.
Crosby might still be there. Get another case of the mumps. He can play until he's 53 or something.
I mean, if they go to the Olympics in 2026, Crosby's going to be what, 39 then? I mean, maybe he's still. Maybe he'll be on the fourth line or something like that. Yeah,
he'll be like a Mercy ad. Yeah. But no, I love international competition with NHL players. It's a lot of fun. It's not the World Cup of soccer by any means, but it is awesome. It is kind of sad. Ovechkin will probably still be playing.
Yeah, well, he's gunning for the goals record. He's not retiring until he breaks that.
He's going Jaromir Jagr. Anyway, next game of the night, we have the San Jose Sharks with a 2.5 total heading into Dallas. The Stars have a 3.5. James Reimer confirmed. Jake Ottinger probable. He was on the starter's crease this morning, so he's looking to be back from injury. Dallas top line, highest owned line of the night. Their power plays have been ridiculous. San Jose Sharks penalty kill has been very, very good. Pretty good 5-on-5 matchup here for both of these top lines. But Dallas's top line is so good on both ends of the ice that I think I wish Dallas top line wasn't 30%, but I think I'll let you talk about the second line. I think there's stuff to like there.
Yeah, I think there's stuff to like pretty much up and down the San Jose or the Dallas roster. I'll say right now is be kind of wary about small sample with those San Jose top line numbers. If you look at their last 4 games, Anaheim twice plus St. Louis in those games, those are teams you absolutely should be kind of running over. So, sorry to the St. Louis Blues fans, but
they suck. Right. They're horrible.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if it's necessarily that's a great top line, or it's a good top line that was just playing really bad teams. I think that might kind of be more the case here. And I have way more faith in the Dallas top line than I do in the San Jose top line. I mean, that Dallas won this year, 3.9 expected goals for per 60 minutes, only 1.8 expected goals against. Like, those are several standard deviations above and below the league average, respectively. Scoring a ton, 6.3 actual goals per 60 minutes. I'll say they are shooting 16.7%, and that's pretty high for a line to shoot at 5-on-5. Like, in a single season, you might see some of the more heavily used elite top lines be at like 14%. I think, Toronto 1 was around that last year, 14 to 15%, if memory serves correctly. So just beware that their 5-on-5 scoring might come down a little bit. And that's a problem for a line where every player in 4 games in the month of November is skating under 17 minutes a game. Like, that is a serious concern, because then when you're skating those few minutes, you are incredibly reliant on percentages to go your way. Now, they have been a pretty efficient line for a couple of years now, so I wouldn't, bank on them just completely cratering. Just, there's probably going to be a little bit of pullback. Jason Robertson has just been on an absolute tear, and part of it is his shooting. His shot attempts per 60 minutes up 22% from last year. That is a big increase. He genuinely looks like a Hart Trophy contender. I don't think he'll ever get that credit, because A, he's not a center, and B, he plays in a southern market, and there's just a ton of Northeast and Canadian media that dominate the hockey media. But Robertson's like, he's pushing his way into like top 7 or 8 players in the league status, I think. Anyways, so they do form a pretty formidable line, and I don't think San Jose 1 is necessarily a brutal matchup for them. They're just coming in with a ton of ownership. We have the Dallas top line coming in at just over 30% on DraftKings, which is leading the slate here tonight. A lot less on FanDuel, where they are very expensive. On FanDuel, they are nearly $25K, which is a pretty big hit. But again, there are a lot of lower priced options that you can use elsewhere on the slate to get those guys in. And you don't even have to use them all. With Jamie Benn on the top power play unit, you can take one out and use a cheaper Benn, not only to dilute the ownership a little bit, but to make the line a little bit cheaper. So that's always an option. You're right about the San Jose penalty kill. I just wonder how much is driven by goalies, because they have a .933 save percentage on the penalty kill so far this year.
Unsustainable.
Yeah, finishing at 900 would be a great season. 933 is just completely unsustainable. So, Dallas is an elite power play. Their top power play unit has just been absolute nails so far this year. With Jamie Benn there, over 13.5 expected goals per 60 minutes. The top power play unit is generating over 100 shots per 60 minutes. To put that into context, there's only one team in the league so far this year that's over 70 as a whole on the power play, like 5-on-4. They are just generating at will against every opponent. So it'll be a good test for San Jose here tonight, but I do not mind Dallas 1. It's just there is a ton of ownership, so you're going to have to get pretty funky and creative with your builds. Dallas 2 is going to have a new third wheel there. They've had a ton of third wheels alongside Mason Marchment and Tyler Seguin. I'm probably going to butcher his name, but it's Mate Blumel. It got called up from the AHL. He's going to be on the second line with Seguin and Marchment. He's definitely not a household name, but I did write him up in the picks article. Again, free to read for everyone over on Stokastic.com. He was a 4th round pick from 2019. Didn't sign with the Oilers. Seems like I don't know. It just seems like every couple years there's this like really good guy that turns out to be a really good hockey player that doesn't want to sign with either the Oilers or the Flames. I guess
Rangers have a bunch.
Yeah, exactly. So tough scene there for the Oilers, but and then he went and signed with Dallas. he's played just 9 professional games in North America. He was playing in the Czech Republic, I believe. He's still young. I think he's only 21, so definitely time to grow. But really good in the AHL this year, 11 points in 9 games with 3.6 shots per game. Sometimes point production can kind of fool you in the AHL. So one thing I do look for as a shortcut is shot volume. If you're producing well, but 2 shots per game, I'm like, eh. But if you're producing well and you have 3.5 shots per game, I'm like, yeah. So pretty good start for him. And I was looking through some of the training camp reports, and it seemed like both the Dallas media and the coaching staff from the Stars kind of agreed that if the Stars weren't so deep up front, that Blumel probably would have made the lineup right out of the gate. But the problem is, you have Robertson and Pavelski, and you have Marchment and Jamie Benn, who were the veterans that were going to get top 4-ish slotting. You have Ty Dellandrea, who showed well enough last year and obviously had a pretty good training camp himself. And then you got veterans with Radek Faksa and Joel Kiviranta. Not that Kiviranta's a veteran, but he's been there for a few years now. There just wasn't room for him on the wing to start the season. But with Gurianov hurt now, he's jumped up to the second line. I don't mind him as a one-off here tonight. I think you can use him kind of in like a 2-man stack if you want with Marchment and Blumel or whatever, because he is super cheap. He's going to come in far lower owned than Marchment and Seguin as well. That's just kind of the nature of third wheelers. I mean, I think the other night, Ryan Lomberg, third wheel on that Lundell Reinhart line for Florida was only like 2 or 3% owned. Like I wouldn't be surprised.
I think.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Blumel comes in that range as well. And then they're going to be going into that second line from San Jose. They haven't been that good this year. 2.7, good offensively, not good defensively. 2.7 expected goals against per 60 minutes in their sample so far this year. So I think that second line is in a good matchup, but it's kind of the third line that is a little bit of interest to me here from Dallas, outside the top line, obviously. Just looking at the depth, Ben, Johnston, and Dellandrea, 70 minutes together, 3.4 expected goals generated per 60 minutes, 5.4 actual goals. Dellandrea hasn't been there all season, but they've been good with or without him. He's just kind of stabilized things a little bit. Jamie Benn has 37 shot attempts in his last 7 games, over 5 per game over those 7 games. He had just 15 in his first 6, 2.5. So he's more than doubled his shot attempt rate over the last 7 games. Part of that, obviously, is jumping to the top power play unit. Part of it, I think, is just this line really starting to play well. So I think if you're looking for, again, don't mind a 2-man of Marchment and Blumel or something like that, or Blumel just a one-off by himself because he's 2,500. But if I'm really looking for a 2-man stack from the depth here, Ben and Dellandrea, Ben and Johnston, something like that, going up against a really bad third line from the Sharks. Now, they've used a bunch of different combinations down there. Hasn't mattered the combination. They've been bad defensively. So I think that Dallas third line, we're not really showing that much ownership for them right now. 3% for Jamie Benn because he's on the power play, but under 2%, under 1% for the other guys. So I kind of like that Dallas third line as one of those depth lines that you can kind of 2-man duo stack that helps you get up to the Tampa Bays and the Pittsburghs and the Torontos and all that. I don't know what I really want to play on the Sharks side. If anything, it would just be power play guys, right? Because Dallas does take a ton of penalties. But the problem is the Sharks don't really draw many power play opportunities. So maybe they don't get a lot here, especially when they're on back-to-back and on the road. So if anything, it would be the power play guys. But honestly, like Tomas Hertl really isn't shooting. Logan Couture is definitely not shooting. Alex Barabanov is not a guy I want to rely on to score goals. Like it just, especially with Jake Ottinger back, the ownership's not even really that low for the Sharks guys either, right? Just looking at the top line at 12%, the second line coming in obviously much lower owned, but with 2 of the 3 guys on the power play, I think you can 2-man stack them. Kind of like you would the Dallas third line, but I really like the Dallas top line in their matchup tonight, but if I kind of like a 2-man duo stack from that Dallas third line to allow me to pay up for the more expensive options elsewhere.
Yeah, and just to add on to that third line, Wyatt Johnston, which is a ridiculous name, by the way. He's not just some guy. He is a first-round pick in last year's draft. He's 19 years old. They had the option to send him down after he played 9 games. They were willing to burn a year on his entry-level contract to keep him up here. That's how highly the Stars think of him. So he's just not some guy. He's going to be a developing guy. Wouldn't be surprised to see him in the top 6 as a top 6 center in the very near future. I kind of agree on the Sharks side, like 14, like Timo Meier just shooting the lights out. Like, but do you want to play 7,500 for Timo Meier when you can get Jason Robertson cheaper in a better matchup? Like, probably not.
I mean, Ovechkin has basically the same ownership and pretty, a little bit more expensive than Meier, but like I think I would rather just play Ovechkin here tonight.
Yeah,
especially where the ownership's similar.
Yeah, so let's move to the blue line. There is someone on the Sharks blue line that I want, just because, like, if you're trying to power play stack, DK made a pricing error. Matt Benning, 2,300 under the min salary floor here. I will say he's been getting like 17 and 19 minutes. Is he doing much with it? Not really, but like 2,300, if it lets you fit in something and he gets like 2 blocks on a shot, I'll sign on the dotted line for 4 DK points for 2,300 right now. So he's fine. Like Erik Karlsson, 8,100. Like he's the guy. If he burns me tonight, he burns me. I'm not playing him. He's too expensive. His shooting percentage is too high. I'd rather play, Karlsson or some of the other expensive defensemen. Miro Heiskanen for me on the Dallas side as a one-off, or, probably about it.
I mean, I might go back to the Mario Ferraro well. He was fine last night. I think he put up like 9 DK points or something like that. He was just 1 block away from the block bonus. Played 21 plus minutes last night. I think Ferraro is probably one of my favorite sub 3K defensemen on the slate here tonight. On the Dallas side, like if I'm not using Heiskanen with the power play guys, I think Esa Lindell, he projects pretty well by Stokastic projections. And the other guys are just coming in with too much ownership. Like I'm not playing 8% Ryan Suter. I'll let everybody else play him.
If I have room to spend up in goalie, Jake Ottinger, if he is indeed confirmed, is probably my favorite goalie play of the night. James Reimer, I guess you can take some stabs on just because Dallas shoots a lot.
Yeah. I think Reimer's fine, but Jake Ottinger, even though he's just returning from injury, I think he's probably like he's at the top in our projections, and I think he's the best player on the slate.
So let's move on to the last game of the night. We have the Minnesota Wild with a 3.2 total heading into Seattle. The Kraken have a 3.2 total. Marc-Andre Fleury probable. Party Marty, Senor Fiesta, Martin Jones confirmed, who's actually been really good the past 4 or 5 games, and I actually do like him tonight, as I'm getting a migraine saying that. The top line is now fully correlated on the power play unit. I say the power play unit because you don't really know which one it is. The second line is fully correlated on the other power play unit. So Bjorkstrand, Wenberg, Burakovsky, fully correlated. Jaden Schwartz, Matty Beniers, Jordan Eberle, fully correlated. Third line, super cheap. McCann, Gore, Tanev. All these lines on Seattle are getting about 8% ownership here. Both of the top 6 lines for Minnesota are getting double digits. Seattle, we've talked about it, or you've talked about it a lot this season. They've been pretty good defensively. Their problems have been in net. Marty Jones has kind of turned it around a little bit. How much interest do you have in the Wild tonight?
So I'll say this. We just got lines while we were on the show for Minnesota, and they said Marcus Foligno is coming back for the Wild. So now I look at the top 6 for the Wild, Gaudreau between Kaprizov and Zuccarello, Eriksson Ek between Boldy and Foligno. Those look like 2 pretty good lines to me. Certainly pretty good defensive lines at the very least, especially with Gaudreau between Zuccarello and Kaprizov. So if I were to do anything, I would want to go after the Seattle line. That is going to be going up against the Wild depth. And they had been using the Yanni Gourde line with Brandon Tanev against top comp earlier in the season. They've kind of gotten away from that a little bit. And they're using them more against third lines of late. And the Minnesota third line, like there's just nothing to speak of there. Like Rossi and Dewar, just, they've been okay, but a little bit below average against this Gord Tanev line. Like, believe it or not, that Gord Tanev line generating 2.6 expected goals per 60 minutes together, 1.0 expected goals against. They're just throttling the opposing competition. Whether Jared McCann comes back tonight or not for Seattle could make a little bit of a difference here. But I like Gordon McCann here in the depth. This is another one of those depth spots that I like from Seattle, or to get up to the more expensive spots. Now they are going to be pretty widely owned, which is a bit of a problem. But the ownership is spread out all across the three lines for Seattle here. So I do like Gordon McCann. If you're asking me which line I would want a full, complete three-man stack, it would be Beniers, Schwartz, and Eberle. Schwartz has been shooting a little bit less, but those shots have been starting to go more to Jordan Eberle. So I think you can leave Schwartz off if you're going to leave off any guy. But Beniers and Eberle and Schwartz have been good this year. 2.4 expected goals for, only 2.1 against. Beniers is leading forwards in ice time in the month of November. The Minnesota penalty kill has been fine, but not great. And Seattle has a great penalty kill. Like a really, really good penalty goaltending can hold up. So I know the Minnesota top line not coming in with a ton of ownership, about 15%. They've got good leverage. But if you're asking me which of the super expensive lines I'd rather play tonight between Minnesota and Tampa Bay, I would probably rather play Tampa 1 here tonight. So Gord and McCann, don't mind. I think if I'm full line stacking, it'd be the Schwartz, Eberle, and Beniers line. On the Minnesota side, real quick, I do like Eriksson, Boldy, and Foligno. That does look like a nice trio to me. I do think that Gaudreau and Kaprizov and Zuccarello going up against the Wenberg line is a pretty good matchup for that Minnesota one. So if anything on the Minnesota side, it would be just right to the top line. But it is, like I said, it is the Beniers line that I think I like the most as a three-man stack in this game.
Yeah, and that's Leafs legend Jared McCann, by the way. I love reminding Leaf fans that they traded for McCann so they could protect Alex Kerfoot. Anyway, moving to the blue line, I do like Vinny Dunn tonight, 4K. I think that's a fine price. Jonas Brodin, Jared Spurgeon, Kalen Addison, Matt Dumba, Jacob Middleton. Pick your guy. I think Spurgeon, Brodin, Dumba are probably the three that I would choose. Cale Fleury back in the lineup. You got to pick the right min-price Seattle defenseman. I went Sousa the other night, and Will Borgen went off the deep end, but probably just done for me.
Yeah, I'll throw in Matt Dumba as well. He's starting to shoot a little bit more after a slow start to the season. So if he's starting to look more like the guy he was last year when he was on pace for double-digit goals, I don't mind Matt Dumba on either side here tonight.
Goalies. I like Marty Jones. It hurts. But yeah, I think I prefer Marty Jones in this game.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I'm not really high on Fleury tonight, and our projections are really low on Fleury tonight. He's actually projecting for less than Marty Jones in raw DK points. So yeah, I agree with you.
Gonna have the sombrero on next week if I get a win from Marty Jones tonight. Highlight, I'm just going nuts here. Coming up right after us, No House Advantage NFL show at 3 o'clock with Eitan and Jeff. Then right after that, the No House Advantage NBA show at 3:30 with Emac and Gundauer. Who are you thinking is your hat-trick pick tonight?
Well, I was going to go somebody from that late game, but that's kind of seems a little bit foolish. I'm going to go the guy I wrote up in my picks article, a little bit of chalk, but Steven Stamkos.
All right. Going to ruffle some feathers here, but I'm going Mitch Marner.
Oh, boy. That would be something, a 5,500 Mitch Marner hat trick here tonight. Hopefully he does it for you. We'll see what happens.
Yep. We'll see what happens. But for Slim Cliffy. I'm your host, Josh Harris. We'll be back tomorrow bright and early for the Saturday morning NHL strategy show. So we'll see you in Discord. Don't forget BetMGM. Good luck, everybody.
Good luck, everyone.